Hi there, everyone. I see attendees starting to roll in. We'll start in a few seconds once Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining. Just waiting for all of our attendees to join the webinar, and then we'll get started momentarily. I see several more people joining. I will start in just a few seconds. Thanks so much for your patience. All right, I think we can begin. So good morning, everyone. Welcome to our very first Jews and Music online event. Thank you so much for being with us today and for your unending support of PBO. I hope you and your loved ones are staying safe and healthy. And I hope that this event and everything else we have planned through 2020 will excite you and keep you company as we can't be in the concert halls together. Before we begin, I wanted to go through a few bits of housekeeping for you all who are joining us on Zoom webinar. If you've never experienced one of these before, welcome. First of all, your video camera and microphone are disabled throughout the event, so we are unable to see you or hear you. Just to note, we'll be playing several audio and video clips during today's presentation. And as you may know, with these online events, the quality of these clips may not be as optimal as would be if you're viewing or listening on your own computers or on YouTube. And also, moreover, some of the clips are from the late 19th and early 20th centuries. So many of them are already fragile clips, if you will. At the bottom of your screen, you'll find a Q&A tab. If you click on this tab, you're able to type questions to our panelists at any time. These questions will be reviewed throughout the event, and at the end, we'll choose several questions for our panelists to answer live. If you need assistance at any time, you can feel free to use the chat feature, which is also at the bottom of your screen, or you can email us at info@philharmonia.org. Now, it's my honor to introduce our Executive Director of Philharmonia Baroque Orchestra and Chorale, Courtney Beck.
Good morning, everyone. It's wonderful to have all of you, our major supporters, joining us today for the launch of JAMOnline. I know that some of you have attended our Jews and Music programs before. For others, this may be your first experience. JAMOnline is the latest iteration of Philharmonia Baroque Orchestra and Chorale's Jews and Music initiative that began in 2015. The goal was to develop a series that would seek to understand the relationships between Jews and non-Jews in the creation of music and art, and the social and political milieus that influenced and continue to influence composition and performance. JAM covers the past and the present from the 17th century until now. It's deliberate in its structure to allow for a range of topics. Over the past 5 years, we've explored Handel's relationship to the Jews of London and his fascination and obsession with biblical heroes from the Old Testament, the music of Solomone Rossi and Monteverdi, who worked together in 17th century Italy, and the concept of the ghetto, Maurice Ravel's arrangement of the Kaddish, and so much more. Some of our JAM programming actually intersects with our regular programming, including our commission of MacArthur Fellow Matthew Aucoin's No One's Rose, originally scheduled for this October, including performances at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, set to text by the Romanian Holocaust survivor and prolific poet and writer Paul Celan. At a future JAMOnline program, we'll talk to Matt about why Celan, and his pairing of Bach with his own work. And just a few more teasers for upcoming programs. We'll be exploring the Jewish-Portuguese connection, music in Israel, klezmer and Baroque music, Kabbalah and Jewish nightlife, Verdi in the synagogue, Hanukkah and Christmas in Venice, the evolution of cantorial music, the Black Jewish experience through music, and conversations with artists including Aryeh Nussbaum Cohen and Anthony Roth Costanzo, to name just a few. Jews and music scholar in residence Francesco Spagnolo has been deeply involved with JAM since the program's inception, including on all of our tours when Jews and Music went to Harvard, Yale, University of Chicago, and Dartmouth. And today is new music director Richard Egarr's Jews and Music debut, and the first time Richard and Francesco are actually working together. You're in for a treat, and we're thrilled that they'll be joined by chorale member soprano Tonia D'Amelio and tenor David Kurtenbach Rivera, with orchestra member Bill Skeen on viola da gamba. We are the only major American orchestra with a dedicated program focused on this vital topic. And we're only able to do this because of the visionary support we receive from the Corrett Foundation, the Ross E. Armstrong and Jonas J.K. Stern Jews and Music Fund, the Gaia Fund, the Bernard Osher Foundation, and the Bloom Music Foundation. Thank you so much for your generosity, and of course to all of you who are here today. Now it's my pleasure to introduce Music Director Richard Egarr and Jews and Music Scholar in Residence Francesco Spagnolo in Tomahto, Text, Language, and Music. Enjoy.
Hello, hello.
Hey, hi, Richard.
We are here.
We're
technological.
Starting. Thank you, Miles. Thank you, Courtney.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah.
It's great to be here with you. My first appearance on the Jews and Music platform.
Fantastic too. And we're going to nerd out together, right?
I'm afraid we are. So I'm hoping there are a lot of at least closet nerds around listening to us with this talk on text, language, and music. It's an incredibly interesting topic, and I think something as we've been discussing it, is something that is a really exciting area that's, I'm sure, ripe for a lot more investigation and development.
In the Jews and Music programming, the relationship to text is essential, and questioning texts and how they're sounded is equally essential. And in a way, it brings us to not just think about the sound of words, but really about the sound of music.
Absolutely, and Francesco will be bringing us an incredibly fascinating example of exactly that after I've nerded out for a bit now. So thank you, Francesco. I'll see you a little bit later.
Absolutely.
I think it's fair to say that language, the delivery of language, has changed enormously over the last 70, 80 years. There are lots of reasons for that. Cultural changes, the advent of radio, recorded sound, amplification is one of the great evils of our age. The idea of stagecraft now has completely changed with the use of amplification in most theatres. There's quite an interesting story. A friend of mine was involved with Les Miserables in London, and there was an anniversary cast party. I think it might have been even a 40th anniversary or certainly 35th anniversary. And the original cast was saying that when they started, they didn't use amplification. And of course, when you use amplification, the way that you speak text is completely different. If you're in a theatre without amplification, you have to exaggerate things and make things super clear. It's a little bit like on camera. If you're very close to a camera, if you just raise an eyebrow, that's all you need to do to convey an emotion. In a theatre, gestures are bigger. So this is something which amplification has really changed the playing field a lot. And with recorded sound, the idea of a received pronunciation of text and language has become more standardized, certainly in Britain. English is a very rich language. It has so many influences, different influences of countries and languages. And I think it's true to say that certainly local dialects are dying out. I was in York with my father a couple of weeks ago, and there was the local radio was bemoaning the fact that local dialects were dying out. And I mean local in terms of the next village. You knew where a person came from just by the way they spoke, if they came from 5 or 6 miles away. And so this standardized approach to text, lazy approach to text delivery has changed the way that language is used, particularly in speech, but also in music as well. I was involved with lots of singing lessons in the 80s and 90s. And I remember very well how singing teachers were eradicating diphthongs and eradicating final R's on the end of flower. Now, flower used to be a 2-syllable word, flower. In fact, it used to be a 2-syllable word with an R on the end of it, flower. And I thought I'd just show you ways we can investigate this. Of course, you can look at old spellings. That's also another huge clue. Spelling wasn't really standardized really until the 19th century. And that's one way of seeing how words were spelt. Again, I come from Yorkshire and I live in Holland, and it's very interesting to see how those two areas, Dutch is kind of a sort of window into the pronunciation of some English words in the past. So I thought I'd just sort of give you an example of how one can investigate that. So there's the written text, which we'll come to a little bit later, but there's also recorded evidence about how text and language has changed. So we'll start by going back to the end of the 19th century and a recording of a very famous Victorian actor, Sir Henry Irving. And as you can see, he was born a long time ago, 1838. Fascinating character. A couple of things to note about him. He's one of the very first knighted actors, if not the first knighted actor. Also, he was the inspiration for Bram Stoker's Dracula. Bram Stoker worked for Irving in one of his theatres in London, and Bram Stoker loved Irving, and apparently Irving was the catalyst for Bram Stoker's Dracula. So just to prepare you, I think Miles has already said this, the early recordings are quite difficult if you're not used to them. This does sound a little bit like it's been recorded inside Niagara Falls, but just will give you a little window into how pronunciation has changed and the delivery. Today, I've been following, I don't know if you've been following one of my great heroes, Sir Patrick Stewart, Captain Jean-Luc Picard, has been reading all of Shakespeare's sonnets online every day. He's been putting one online. Wonderful actor, and I've seen him act live on stage without amplification in Waiting for Godot, which was extraordinary. But the intimate way he delivers the sonnets is very uninflected. It's because it's close mic'd, but you can see with what we're about to hear for these first 3 clips, the way that these actors deliver this text is much more, it's much more sung, and much more sung in a very melodramatic way. It's very colorful. There's a lot of dynamic flexibility, a lot of tempo flexibility, and words like glorious, chewed, summer, York, you'll hear lots of things. So just concentrate on the text and you'll hear little insights into the old way of pronouncing some of this text. And it's particularly the delivery, which is very colorful, and it's designed to be done in a theater where people can get to the idea of the shape and the dynamic of the text.
Now is the wind out of our discontent, made glorious summer by this central song. And all the clouds that thou art upon our house, in the deep bosom of the ocean buried. Now are our prows crowned with victorious fleet, our cruised arms and up for monuments, our carnal arms is the very meaning. Artful arches, delightful welcome.
There's something more guttural, more chewy, and for someone who's a sir and brought up in an upper class, you have our, and again, very, very chewed consonants, vowels and consonants, very, very clear. And the next one is another actor, Herbert Beerbohm tree, actually his name was Beerbohm, which is probably sort of roughly German Dutch meaning bear tree. The tree was added later as his anglicized name. And again here, this famous soliloquy from Hamlet, the way he uses pacing and dynamic, particularly with the repetitions of to die, to sleep, and when that comes again to sleep, you'll hear. And again, the same thing. The vowels are they're not flat, they're curvaceous. The diphthongs are allowed to make a curve in the line. And again, all of the consonants, all of the R's, the double F's, they're all there. So have a listen to this. This is recorded a little later, so it's slightly less waterfall-like.
To be or not to be, that is the question. Whether it is nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take arms against a sea of struggle, and by opposing end it. To die, to sleep, no more, and by a sleep to say we end the heartache and the thousand natural shocks that flesh is heir to. To die, to sleep, perchance to dream. Aye, there's the rub.
Wonderful, wonderful use of language. Mind is really tuned. Arms, I don't know whether you noticed, there was a flick of an R in there. And heartaches, the same thing. So this lovely, delicious approach to nurturing the qualities of the language and the vowels and the consonants, the chewiness and color of it. And now for sort of a reference to a musical piece, I'm sure you're all aware of your Schubert Lieder, and especially the very famous ones, particularly something like the Erlkönig, one of Schubert's greatest creations. There's a fascinating early recording of this being read by this Alexander Moissi. Actually, that's a slightly Italianized version of his name. He was born in Trieste, but was of Albanian parents and lived in Germany. So it's a sort of really interesting mixture of cultures. So actually born in the Ottoman Empire, in fact. And this is a fantastic text by Goethe, the Erlkönig. And you hear, this is really scary. This is really, I mean, Schubert's setting is really scary, but the delivery of this text is quite extraordinary. Again, for our ears, perhaps overdone, purple, full of character and sort of melodrama. And you hear the four personages. You hear the narrator, the father, the son, and then the Erlkönig. The characterization is so vivid and it's really extremely scary. And again, the language is just so clear.
Wer reitet so spät durch Nacht und Wind? Es ist der Vater mit seinem Kind. Der hat den Knaben wohl in dem Arm. Er fasst ihn sicher. Er hält ihn warm. Mein Sohn, was birgst du so bang? Dein Gesicht? Siehst, Vater, du den Erlkönig nicht? Den Erlenkönig mit Kron und Schweif? Mein Sohn, es ist ein Nebelstreif. Liebes Kind, komm, geh mit mir. Gar schöne Spiele spiel ich mit dir. Manch bunte Blumen sind an dem Strand. Meine Mutter hat manch gülden Gewand.
Sends shivers down my spine every time I hear that. It's absolutely wonderful use of text and languages. And this is what we try to do in early music. We talk about using the text all the time, but in fact, it's very rare that we go to those extremes, if you like, and we probably should be. And to give you an example of how, again, that has changed in the way that people sing these days compared to 100 years ago, I've got some recordings of a couple of singers. The first one is Layla Megan, or Margaret Jones as she was christened. This is a recording of two little bits of Elgar's sea pictures orchestra in 1922. So it's also a nice little snapshot of orchestral playing, or at least kind of snapshot of orchestral playing at that time under Elgar himself. And two little extracts, the first from the first song, Sea Slumber Song, and then a little extract from Sabbath Morning at Sea. And all those things I've been talking about, the use of the absolute clarity of all consonants, the use of R's at the end of the word. So sea birds, they're all there, birds, not birds, which is, modern pronunciation would be bird. It'd be a very flat vowel. There'd be no R, not birds. But it sounds almost Scottish or Welsh, but these are English singers, British singers. And there's no difference between a Scottish and a Welsh performer at this time. It's just the clarity of the text. Soft Slumber Song, Elfin Land, you'll hear there's this clarity to the text. And the same thing in the second little extract, which will follow straight on. We get to the word fire. Now, again, these days you would be taught as a singer to sing far. There would be no R and there would be no diphthong. You'd be sent out of the classroom if you hinted at either of those things. And in fact, it's interesting because in the score, the word fire, Elgar writes only on one note. He doesn't give it two syllables. But you listen to Layla, she rips into it with fire and with a huge R at the end of it as well. But it's so clear above quite a big orchestral background. So again, this sort of idea that text has to be clear and fully formed in a delivery, a dramatic delivery of music. So let's listen to these two little extracts. And as you're going on, read the text and you'll hear all these, everything that she's doing with the vowels and the consonants.
More
fantastic. Stirs the blood of an Englishman listening to that stuff. Oh, fantastic. But as you can see, again, things that singers would not be allowed to get away with now. Creator on. They're not creator on, which is how you'd be made to sing it these days. It keeps the legato of the phrase, but it keeps the color and the curve of the language as well. So the consonants obviously are really, really important. That's something clearly which has been degenerated, the use of consonants fully since about the 1950s. Vowels are a little harder because, again, regional accents and the great vowel shift, if you're familiar with all that, how vowels have changed. So one of the little sentences I put up in the preamble to this was blowing in the wind. Does that rhyme with love is blind or love is blind? Blind. That's something which they did used to rhyme. In Dutch, again, that's wind, blind. That's still the same in Dutch now. So vowels are a little more tricky, but there's certainly lots of things which have changed in the last 100 years. And that's a tricky one sometimes, the further you go back to know exactly which vowels go where, but they're certainly different from this flat approach to vowels. So we come on to another singer now to show a little bit of that, and also what we've just been talking about. A great English tenor called Heddle Nash. Wonderful tenor, one of my favorite tenors. And this is a little bit of later music, Puccini, in English, from the famous Che gelida manina. Again, today, if you were singing it in English, you'd be your. Be completely flat, not your. It wouldn't have a diphthong of any description, and it certainly wouldn't have the r. But again, your, like our, it's basically a two-syllable word. Our should be a two-syllable, particularly in the 17th, 16th, 17th, 18th centuries. So listen to this, Ben, the beautiful way he uses the text. And it's a most gorgeous, gorgeous voice.
Your tiny hand is frozen, let me warm it into life. Our touch is useless, in darkness all is hidden. Erlang the light of the moon shall aid us, yet in the moonlight of touch let us continue.
Beautiful, beautiful. Again, all those things we've been talking about. Coming back to the vowels, the next clip is very interesting, actually. It's the very famous aria from Jephthah. As you can see the text in front of you, I don't want to actually pronounce it for you yet. Just consider the first word of the title, W-A-F-T. Think of other words like it. In Northern English, it would be things like craft, shaft, daft, same kind of thing as bath, wrath. There's an interesting one. My favorite movie, second Star Trek movie. You say the wrath of Khan. We say the wrath of Khan these days. So this shift of the A vowel is quite an interesting one. Now, any modern tenor singing this aria, and I did it last year at the Proms with wonderful Alan Clayton singing, and any modern tenor will come to sing this aria and they will sing it waft, W-O-F-T. And it's a technical thing. It's just where it lies in the voice, and it makes it more secure and less open to sing waft rather than wa, which it should be. It's an a vowel. There's no way that an 18th, 17th century person would have pronounced that a anything other than an a. So, and you can hear this in Heddle Nash's performance of it. It's definitely not the sort of modern wa. It's a little higher, and you can hear. And again, it's just the most gorgeous, gorgeous. And another interesting word to look out for is the as we would say it now, azure, completely differently pronounced, as you'll hear. fascinating stuff. So these are lots of this. All this stuff gives us lots of clues. Well, it also gives us, I think, extreme permission to investigate this colorful approach to delivering the language, both as a speaker and certainly as a singer. So at this point, I'd love to invite Francesco back in to do some homing in on Venice.
Yes, again.
To confirm all of this stuff that we've been looking at.
Richard, don't even get me started with Italian regional pronunciations and accents, which actually are all reflected into Hebrew. So
Right.
local synagogue tradition pronounces Hebrew in slightly different way that sort of mimic the different, widely different accents of the Italian peninsula. But with Filarmonia Barocca, as you know, over the last 5 years, at this point, we've been presenting Hebrew from Italy, sung, set to music in the 17th, 18th centuries. And one of the great opportunities that collaborating with Filarmonia has given me is to actually rethink the modern editions of this music. More specifically, today we're focusing on the compositions of Salomone Rossi, who was the first one to set Hebrew music to scores, as far as to musical scores, to musical notation, as far as we know. And so the opportunity to kind of resound this Hebrew. And in order to do that, and I'll be guiding you and our listeners, our viewers, into a series of logic puzzles. So it's not just about finding the sound, but how do we find it? And it's really an interesting mind twist to really claim back these sounds. As you were saying, we are focusing today on Venice in the context of the modern thinking of Jews and music. This is where it all began. It's the cradle of modern Jewish musical civilization. Not just Venice, but thanks to Google Earth, we are able to see the beautiful city, and the island within the island that I circled in red is the ghetto, where the ghetto is located. And we can also find depictions of the ghetto in contemporary prints. I think we have an image coming up of the ghetto in the 1700s, in the 18th century, with very tall buildings that not only scoped over the rest of the city, bubbling international hub of business, trade, and of course culture and music, but also scoped orally on the sounds of the city, on the soundscape of the city.
I shall leave you to it. I shall.
So within the ghetto, there were many synagogues, almost too many to think of today. This is the so-called Schola Tedesca German synagogue, one of the two Ashkenazi synagogues of the ghetto, and there were also two Sephardic synagogues. We see one of them in the next slide. The reason I'm showing these is because these were not just synagogues and places of worship, but also places for presentation of Jewish culture to non-Jews. The ghetto was heavily visited by non-Jews, often sneaking in at night, using Carnival and Purim as ways to mingle. And as I'm fond of telling, they would sneak into the ghetto. Non-Jews would sneak into the ghetto at night to go to synagogue services, more or less at the same time that Jews would sneak out. All you had to do was bribe the guards at the gates at the entrance of the ghetto itself, and go to the opera. But all of this was actually engineered at the Italian synagogue, which is the smallest one. It's a little corner. It was actually the synagogue of a Kabbalist, but the place where a rabbi, he was a rabbi, intellectual poet, and also compulsive gambler, Leone Modena, engineered the publication of Salomone Rossi's Shirim Asher Shlomo, the Songs of Solomon, which in the title page, which we see on the screen, among other things, announced in Hebrew that this was what was being published there was a new thing on the land. And what was new was really the putting together, as we see in the next slide, of music and Hebrew text on the same page. Now, in order to do this, and this is our first logic puzzle, one had to combine a language, that of music, that's traditionally written from left to right. So the music notations that you see on the page, they are written from left to right. The key is at the beginning, at the top of the page on the left, and the notes follow from left to right. And Hebrew words are written from right to left. So it's an interesting form of syncretism, but also in a way it's an embodiment on the printed page. This was printed in Venice in the 1620s of the symbiosis of cultures. These cultures and the people who were able to print these materials on the page had to come from different cultures, mostly Christian printers of music and Hebrew typesetters of the Hebrew had to collaborate together in the Venetian printing houses. So the engineer, the cultural engineer of this project was Leone Modena, who also gives us in his works some hints on how we can pronounce the Hebrew on these pages. Leone Modena, when he was very young, I think he was maybe 14, 15, wrote and the title of this is quite on key with the Jewish calendar this week. Tonight, Tisha B'Av, the 9th of Av, it begins its celebrations, and Kinot or lamentations are part of the liturgy, but this is a modern, aka late 1500s Kina lamentation that's homophonic. So it's written in both Hebrew and Italian. It's actually two poems that are designed to sound the same in either language. So it's two poems that mean different things. This was written as a note in memory of Leone Modena's own teacher when he was a young man. And if I were to read the Hebrew, just the first line on the top, reading from right to left, it would read something like Kina shemor oime che passo cerbo. And if I were to read Italian, I would read Kina shemor oime che passa cerbo. So the sound of the two languages is meant to be the same. Again, a way of a syncretic, of displaying a syncretic symbiosis between two cultures. But if we want to sound all this Hebrew, we cannot do it according to the standard pronunciation of Hebrew that's become current, especially since the establishment of the State of Israel. So it's a 20th century affair of the resurgence and reinvention of Hebrew as a modern language. We have to devise a way to sound it, which is traditional, it's peculiar to Italian Jews. So just to give you an example, if I point to two words on this page, so we go down a few lines and you follow the red highlight. If I were to read the Hebrew of those two words in the modern pronunciation, it would be mavet ra. But if only reading it in the Italian pronunciation, so maved ran, I'm able to have those words sound the same also in Italian, mavedran. In other words, for those Hebrew nerds in the audience, the letter tav at the end of a word, for example, for the word Shabbat, is pronounced with a D sound, so Shabbat, in this case, maved, and the word ein, which is a consonant that takes various vowel values, is pronounced as depending on the region, as a n or n sound. With Philharmonia Baroque, we've been able to re-engineer the Hebrew of certain compositions from this time, reflecting this type of pronunciation changes. And as we will see, this has also all kinds of implications in terms of the critical edition of the music itself. So rethinking the sound of the words, in this case, leads us to rethink the structure of the music and the sound of the music itself. To accompany me in this, and we can move to the next slide, accompany me in this exploration and this set of explanation of logic puzzles. I have the honor of working with David Kurtenbach Rivera, who should be on screen with us shortly. And David is part of the Philharmonia Chorale. We've toured together. Courtney was saying earlier that the program of Jews in Music has been touring nationally. We've toured together, so we've had many occasions to collaborate. And today we're showing a little bit how the sound of music for this repertoire is made. So here are some examples. Let's get started. This is from the first one is just a short excerpt from a setting by Salomone Rossi of Mizmor Shir LeYom HaShabbat. This is just as a reminder, Psalm 92 is sung on Friday night to introduce the Sabbath. This is just a few earlier, the beginning verses, and just as a reminder of what this psalm is about. And here is the page for the tenor part that David will be singing in Hebrew. Again, we have to first decipher the combination between Hebrew and notes, but also we have to sound the Hebrew a certain way. So let's just zero in on two verses from this psalm. In our next slide, we see them highlighted, and we see how we have to read the music going from left to right, and each Hebrew word reading it from right to left, and therefore switching it around in order to make it fit to the music. It's almost an impossible feat. The late Professor Don Haran, also a teacher of mine at the Hebrew University in Jerusalem, we see in the next slide, did a fantastic modern edition of the entire settings of Hebrew texts by Salomone Rossi. And this is his setting. And I'm highlighting here the part of the tenor. And then with David's help, we're going to sound it both the way in which Don Haran transliterated and adapted it into the modern edition using modern pronunciation of Hebrew. And then we'll be using, let's say, the PBO, Jews and Music version of this Hebrew. In other words, how we're researching these texts and resounding this music. So on the next slide, we're zeroing in on a part that David, who should be on screen with
yes, hello, Francesco.
Here you are. David is going to sing it. David, you remember the first thing I instruct chorale members with is when they're singing Hebrew, they actually have to think in Italian. So all of your vowels are, so it's not Shabbat, it's Shabbat, etc. All your A, E, I, O, U are really wide open as if you were singing Italian. So do think you're singing Monteverdi, even though this is not Monteverdi and it's definitely not Italian. Would you mind sounding for us the critical edition by Don Haran, so the top part, and then we'll go into the changes together.
Yeah, you bet. Mizmor shir leyom hashabat tov lehodot ladonai ulzamer leshimcha elyon.
And then we switch to this re-engineered Italian pronunciation of Hebrew. The Z sound becomes a Z sound. The T at the end of the word often becomes a D sound, a D. And so Shabbat instead of Shabbat. And vowels can be much longer or spread out in different ways according to the notes. Would you mind singing that for us?
Sure.
Again, this is all live, so thank you, David, for braving a live Zoom performance today.
Mizmor shir leyom hashabad tov lehodod ladonai uled zamer leshimcha elyon.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So what happens here, and David, you know this because we've been doing this work with 8 voices for this piece.
Yes.
Is that these little changes that we make to the pronunciation and the relationship between text and notes have a ripple effect on the entire piece. In other words, we are kind of improvising with the chorale a new edition, a new modern edition that's inspired by old sort of lexical evidence, a new modern edition of this work. Here is an example that we recorded with and singing was not the Philharmonic Chorale, was the Yale Voxtet when we toured this program at Yale at Harvard a few years ago. The conductor, so I think we have the next slide. The conductor was of course Nick McGeegan, and let's hear just a snippet of this. just a little snippet, but we are creating an online archive of various performances. We'll be adding more, and of course, what we're recording today, to build this repertoire and really resound it little by little. We have more help in rethinking the Hebrew of the time and really tuning in to the sound of the Venetian ghetto, the first Jewish ghetto in history, with the work and the compositions of Benedetto Marcello. So we're moving a century later into the Jewish musical history of Venice. And I think we have a contemporary portrait of Benedetto Marcello, who in the 1720s published a vast compilation called Esso Poetico Armonico, in which he reconstructed the music of the past, including the ancient past, and then resounded it into his own compositions with new texts. He also, this way, published in his collection the transcription of 11 Hebrew songs that he had heard and presumably transcribed in the Venetian ghetto from both the Ashkenazi and Sephardic traditions of the ghetto. So we're focusing on snippets of both. And first of all, Benedetto Marcello, a century later, after Salomone Rossi resolved, we have a slide that shows this, resolved the issue of the two opposing senses of music notation in Hebrew by actually writing the musical notes also from right to left. So in this case, there is a direct match between the notes you see and the Hebrew text that you see below. But when we try to translate this into modern notation, as my colleague Edwin Ceruzzi, also Hebrew University, did, we have a slide coming up that shows this. When we try to do this, we may run into problems, and the only way to really sound this text correctly is to rethink of the Italian pronunciation of Hebrew, and also use field recordings. In this case, I'm sharing with you a field recording was made in the 1950s in Verona, Italy, so nearby Venice. It's a musically a variant of this melody that shortly David is going to sing for us, but we can appreciate the language, the Hebrew language in there. So let's hear this short snippet.
Besed Israel mi Misraim bed Yaakov megam longes ayeda Yehuda lekodosho Israel mamsheludau.
So with the aid of the original score, a modern transcription by a musicologist, and of course a field recording that I've unearthed and studied, we get to the next slide and to the work that we do with the chorale and that we're doing with David today. So let's see how the pronunciation changes. So David, if you don't mind playing the same game and helping us solve this puzzle. So first you'll sing the text above. There was the transcription by a colleague who published these transcriptions about 15 years ago, and then how we're resounding them with Philharmonia.
Betzet Israel mi Mitzrayim, Bet Yaakov me'am loez, Hayta Yehuda lekocho, Israel mam shelotav.
And if you were to sing it with my pesky transliteration, we hear almost a different piece.
Betzed Israel mi Mitzrayim, bed yam Yaakov men yam lonyez, hayeda Yehuda lekocho, Israel mam shelotav.
Thank you. And what a pleasure to be able to hear your voice from home.
Oh, thank you so much,
David. It's so. David, do you want to add something about the sort of the kind creative mess I put the chorale in, because it's a lot of many adjustments, right? When we rehearse, it's many pencil in notes to really change the score from what you get and what you present
Yeah, it is. Some of us, I would say, have kind of regular exposure to singing in Hebrew through synagogue work, maybe during like high holy days, stuff like that. But when you're presented with a score like the one on top, the white and the black text, you see and kind of parse every single consonant as it comes. So it kind of reads very clearly, Betzet Yisrael, Mim Yitzrayim, et cetera, et cetera. What you're asking for is slightly different, and it requires a little bit of softening of consonants in some places, like instead of betzet, we say betzed, and mimitz, mimids. But the most interesting one, and the one that I certainly have the most marks in my score for, is the nya, like in Yan Yaakov or Men Yam Lonyez.
And we're still working on this combination, whether it should be nya or nya, and but it's kind of fun to experiment with this, and it's a great sandbox we have to rethink about sounds. That being said, with your help, we are also thinking about something else. How, since Benedetto Marcello composed his own music set to Italian lyrics based on these melodies, we're also rethinking about the sound of the Italian compositions that way. So it's a project that goes from historical musicology into ethnomusicology into performance practice. I love working with Baroque musicians because they're kind of like jazz musicians. They're so good at improvising and changing things. They know that what's on the page and what's delivered is not necessarily the same thing. And so we can really, really go wild with this. But I'm curious to hear how this sounding of the Hebrew then impacts also your relationship to the Italian you're performing based on the same melodies.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely, as you change the Hebrew, it makes the line sing in a different way. And I think, especially when you're using the nya sound, that's one that's very common in Italian, and one that we're all familiar with, at least studying like in undergrad Italian stuff. But it gives it more line, I think. Instead of Yaakov, Yan Yaakov, it kind of sings itself a little bit more, more beautifully, I think.
So David is now going to perform another composition by Marcello, preceded by his own transcription from the Hebrew, and we'll hear the transition from Hebrew into Italian. So I'm going to silence myself out and let this is the original transcription on the page of Marcello's Questo Poetico Armonico, again Hebrew and notes, and then we have a modern. We'll see and we'll hear David sing from a modern edition of this text, and then transitioning into Marcello's own composition based on the music.
Tzvi asher barach elai O Immaculata e pura, Santa Divina Legge, con anima rivolge al tuo suo fattor, che testimon fedele del suo voler sovrano e sapienza infonde de semplici nel cor.
Thank you so much, David.
Yes.
Thank you for indulging me in this exercise in musical nerddom. But we really are resounding and retuning into the sounds of the Venetian ghetto and building up from there. So thank you very much for your wonderful performance today. And well, I guess it's my turn now to bring Richard back for more nerdy tidbits and actually more beautiful music. Hello.
That was so fabulous. Fantastic, Francesco and David. Thank you so much.
Now you know what's waiting for you, Richard, in working.
Yeah, well, I mean, you mentioned this sandbox, and I think that this, we've got all these ideas and things that we can learn from it, this historical investigation, and it is a sandbox, and it's so exciting to sort of, as you say, work with these great musicians and give them some permission to play with it, to play with the text and to color it. So we'll do a little bit more of that now. Just not too long, so I'm aware that we're already on our mark. So if I may introduce a wonderful soprano, Tonia D'Amelio, who is going to help me with the last little bit of nerding of text and music and language. Tonia, are you there?
Hi, yes, I am.
Hello, hello. So I gave you a couple of bits of English song, a song by Dowland from his first book of airs from 1597, and a little bit of Purcell, Henry Purcell. And I sort of gave you a few ideas and gave you a little recording to chew on and let you run with it. And you were amazing what you came up with, I must say. Was it fun to have permission to be naughty with the text?
It was, in fact. Diphthongs and consonants were very chewy, and that was a lot of fun. It made the text more conversational than sung.
Fantastic. Well, we're going to start with the Dowland, and if I could just maybe ask you, I was going to, if Miles could put the text of this Dowland, very wonderful Dowland song, which is very familiar to people. Could you perhaps sing the first 4 lines as you might have been told to do it by your worthy teachers at college, with no diphthongs and no final R's?
Okay, will do. Now I needs must part, parting though I absent mourn. Absence can no joy impart. Joy once fled cannot return.
Oh, staggeringly beautiful, even in that rendition where you were behaving very well. And again, I talked about early spelling. Now, it's quite kind of interesting. If we go back to the original spelling of this, the word mourn has an E on the end of it. Joy has an E on the end of it. Return has an E on the end of it. So it's kind of interesting, just that immediately sort of implies something slightly different. But now if we can play, you made a wonderful recording of this after I'd given you the permission to be naughty with Bill Skeen. So let's listen to what Tonia did with it. And it's absolutely wonderful and chewy and delicious.
Now, oh now, I needs must part, parting though I absent mourn. Absence can no joy impart.
Dear, if I from thee am gone, gone are all my joys at once. I loved thee, and thee alone, in whose love I joyed once. And although your sight I leave, sight wherein my joys do lie, till that death to sense bereave, never shall affection die. Sad despair doth drive me hence, this despair unkindness sends. If that parting be offence, it is she which then offends. Dear, if I do not return, love and I shall die together, for my absence never mourn, whom you might have joyed ever. But we must, though now I die, I do to part with you. Him despair doth cause to lie, who both lived and died true. Sad despair doth drive me hence, this despair unkindness sends. If that parting be offence, it is she which then offends.
Fantastic, fantastic. Thank you, Tonia. I can tell you enjoyed that.
I did. It was very chewy and very intimate in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and it's. I mean, if you look at again the love, prove that these vowels now they relate to each other, or the more and all these things that we have in the text, as you saw as we were going through, it makes perfect sense. And interesting, the other piece that I gave you to look at, Purcell Sweeter Than Roses, has exactly the same rhyming problem, love and prove. So it's we move on to that. What I was saying about the singing teaching ethic, is that was I making that up?
Not at all.
No. Yeah. Just wanted to confirm that with everybody. And it's such a pity because the language is so rich and colorful, and what this does is releases all of these flavors and tastes and colors. And I think, as I said, it's difficult to know precisely because, I mean, any singer, even these days, there are still regional accents. So a natural accent from the northeast of England and the southwest of England are still incredibly different. And I think that diversity is really fascinating, and it would be interesting to explore these local differences even more. So again, could you sing the first couple of lines of Sweeter Than Roses for us, as you would have been trained to do so?
Sure. Sweeter than roses, Shall I go on?
Yeah, no, that's good. I mean, again, the or cool. Again, that was incredibly. You can see the vowels very flat. Or cool, just very flat lines. Well, again, let's hear what a wonderful thing you did with this very famous Purcell song. Again, listen to the way that Tonia allows love and prove to actually rhyme with each other, which it's so fabulously done. So just to get a load of this. Fantastic.
Thank you.
I think if ever there was a demonstration that investigating this way of approach to text, I mean, it's just wonderful. It's so colorful and delicious and totally clear. It's so much. It's really wonderful throwing that at you and what you came up with. Really wonderful. Francesco, you're back.
Richard, we are back. I think we are closing our program and seeing if there are any questions from our audience. But
hello.
This was fantastic. Hi, Miles.
I returned from the wings. Yeah, so I just welcome everyone who participated in this. If you could kindly start your video and unmute yourselves so we can all rejoin and regroup. How fantastic this was. Thank you all for such a riveting and really unique and innovative experience. So I thank you. We have a few questions, and I don't want to take too long because I know we're over. But there was one question from an anonymous. Let's see. Yes, an anonymous attendee to Richard. Do you ask the singers to use these early English pronunciations, including the rolled R's?
Absolutely, it's something I'm trying to get people to do more and more. So as I say, in the Jethro I did last year, Alan, he went quite a way to singing waft rather than the sort of boring waft. But it's just a mindset. And I did a Dido and Aeneas a few years ago. My first appearance in the big hall at Carnegie Hall. It's actually with Montreal group. And Karina Gauvin was singing Dido. And whenever we had the word Y-O-U, they pronounced it yow, as in Y-O-U-W, which is, if you look at 18th, 17th century text, it was still spelt with a W at the end of it. In fact, in Holland, again, where I'm living, yow is still the word for you. It's still a sort of familiar way of saying you, yow. And even in England, Birmingham, if you go to Birmingham, they're saying yow all the time. So it just breaks the mold of this flatness. So it's just giving singers a little bit of something to work with. It's something I'm trying to bring in the way people are pronouncing English. Yes.
Thank you. And then this was also to everyone, but to Richard especially. This is from Michael. Music plays notes, but language exists for meaning. The word means the same by a Scotsman, Londoner, or New Yorker. Theater song, lieder, or opera may differ unless the composer specifies the accent but unless the composer specifies the accent or the sound, for example, O versus A, should we worry about the carried vowel or meaning, in which case some of these demonstrations may be moot?
You want to start on this one, Francesco?
I was just thinking. I'm so glad this was specifically for you. But a way to take this awesome question is to say yes. I think we worry about it. I mean, worry in a good way, but we worry about everything when preparing a performance. So we do worry about these things as well. This program was sort of a way to kind of expose the process that goes very much behind the scenes and make it part of how we present this. But yes, we do worry all the time in our sandbox.
We're looking for certainly things have become straightened and slightly rigid in the way that we are presenting text within music. Of course, the meaning is the same. The musical meaning should be the same. It's just it's like using old instruments, as I said at the very beginning. Using this idea about how to deliver language can only help, ultimately, hopefully, help the delivery of that meaning to make it more colorful and more expressive.
I certainly agree, and it's a fantastic sandbox that we've been in today. I have a question also from an anonymous attendee. Is there a connection between the Sprechstimme in pieces like Pierre Lunaire and these early diction traditions?
It's funny you say that, because I literally the other morning, having been sort of listening to a lot of these early recordings of actors, you can see that is particularly for the Erlkönig that we had, that idea of that kind of very heightened melodramatic delivery of text. It feeds directly into the idea of Sprechstimme in Scherberg, and there's actually other actors and actresses from the beginning of the 20th century. The great Sarah Bernhardt from France delivering Racine and great French dramas from it. It has the same kind of color that you heard in that Erlkönig excerpt. So that I think there may well be. There is some research being done. A great colleague of mine, Jed Wentz, is very into the early 20th century, late 19th century acting styles and also silent movies as well. So there's work being done on all of this now, and it's very exciting to to see what's going on, because it really does. Again, I think it can only help us with permission to explore all of these kinds of colors in text and language.
And Schoenberg also set Hebrew to music, and it felt like a natural continuation of his work on Sprechgesang. In other words, the idea of music stemming out of text. Mm-hmm. And so the musicality originating in the text itself is very much part of that approach, and it's a characteristic of old synagogue song, pretty much.
Well, thank you for all of those brilliant questions. I'm sorry that we didn't get to all of them, but I don't know if Courtney wants to come back, but anything else for the greater good?
It was really fun, and thank you.
It was so fun.
To everyone, particularly our musos, David and Tonia, and Bill in absentia, who's
yes,
and Miles for the technical expertise of putting that all together. So
it's my pleasure. Thank you.
Great fun.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much. And I want to thank our audience for being here as well. We've had a tremendous showing today. If we weren't able to answer any questions right now, it would be terrific if you could still submit your questions, because I know that Richard and Francesco or any of our soloists today would be happy to answer these questions. We want this to be an ongoing dialogue, not just episodic. So please do feel free to send your questions. You can send them to me directly or to Miles, my email.
Yeah, I'd suggest you send them just to info@philharmonia.org, and they will go to the proper channels. So we'd be happy to answer them.
Wonderful. Thank you all. And again, thank you so much to our incredible supporters, the Corrette Foundation, Rossi Armstrong and Jonas J.K. Stern, Jews and Music Fund, the Gaia Fund, the Bernard Osher Foundation, and the Bloom Music Foundation. And of course, all of you. It's just been wonderful and incredibly illuminating. So really, really lovely way to spend a Wednesday. Thank you so much.
Indeed.
For Philharmonia.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Bye, everyone. See you next time.
Bye.